Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of Guide to the Gridiron. Sal Capaccio here, Eric Turner as well. We are going to walk you through today the wide receiver route tree. We had a lot of fun and a lot of great feedback on the first episode talking about the names of the wide receivers, the terminology of where each wide receiver lines up and who they are. And Eric, now we kind of expand that and we can talk about exactly some of the routes that they're going to run and what they're called because some of the same routes can be called two different names or three different names or a bunch of different names.
Yeah, this is why football is so much fun. We talked about alignments and what those wide receiver positions were last week, and now we're going to dive into some of again the terminology, like you said, the routes, the route concepts. And one thing that we need to really throw out there, Sal, is that with each team and each playbook, and all the different coaching trees, they're going to have their own terminology, and so we're going to try to throw a few out there that we know personally, growing up through the system, playing in the game, obviously coaching the game, but also we're going to tie it back to the Bills a little bit, and we just need to understand fans to understand that it's a language, and so there are going to be a lot of different names for these routes and route combinations, and so we're just going to try to whittle it down to a few so that you guys understand it when you hear it on Sundays.
All right, let's just get a couple house cleaning items before we get to this. We are on audio and video. Of course, if you're watching us, you're going to see the graphics. You're going to see everything kind of put in play in front of your eyes to help you understand the game. Like we're trying to understand you through this video series, and we appreciate that. But if you only listen on audio, you can still get a lot of the gist of it, and it's okay. So you can find us on iTunes, wherever you pod, basically, and of
Yeah.
course on video. And on video, we're a couple of different places. We're trying to make this available to everybody as much as possible. And of course, Cover One, they do a great job over there. Eric and his team, you can find it on their YouTube page, mine as well. Sal Sports on YouTube. Eric from Cover One. I'm at WGR Sports Radio 550. This is just something that Eric and I got together to do to help football fans as we prepare for the 2023 season. Also, we've had a great amount of feedback. We really appreciate it from everybody. Let us know if there's something that you want to learn, want to know. We have a lot of plans for things that we think people should want to know, but sometimes there's things, Eric, that you know what? I guess we should go over that because football has
Yeah.
evolved and changed over the years, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's the thing, once the season starts and we have, the grind of covering on the sidelines for you, your radio spots, and what we do with the film breakdowns and stuff at Cover One, a lot of times we get caught up in the jargon and we just throw these terms out there and really just gloss over them, and we lose some fans because of it. So again, we're trying to slow the game down and really encompass all of the average fans as well that are maybe even just learning the game so that you guys can stay up to speed when you're watching the game live.
Don't ever be afraid to ask everyone. I think that's part of the issue sometimes. People have told me, I'm sure they've told you, Eric, man, I
No
really
doubt.
never knew what that meant, but I was afraid to ask. Thanks for explaining it. Don't worry. Football can be a real football people like to get to football terminology and they have
Yes.
all these different terms. And nobody really it's kind of kept private or secret. It shouldn't be, of course, right? I mean, it's everybody's game. It's
Right.
a game we all love. We want to enjoy together. So let's do it. Let's talk about what we call a route tree. It's called a route tree because it looks like a tree. It looks like branches. It looks like something coming out of the ground
Right.
with a bunch of leaves coming off of it and branches coming off of it. And when a team says the route tree, they're basically referring to all the different passing routes and that running routes through passing that a wide receiver or a tight end would run. And we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And now let's do it this way first, Eric. Let's talk about in and out so everybody's kind of clear on where we are here. So what you
Right.
see on your screen is a route tree. I'm gonna pretend. Let's pretend at what you're looking at, folks. Let's pretend the quarterback is where the ball is. See ball at the bottom left, this way to the left. Okay, so anything that goes towards the quarterback would be in. Everything that goes away from the quarterback towards the sideline would be out. So if the ball was on the other side, where you see at Matt Bowen, who is a part of this graphic, Eric can tell you that
Yeah.
in a
Thanks to
second.
him.
Yeah, if Matt Bowen is that's where the ball is, then anything to the right would be in, and anything to the left would be out. It's just a basic concept that you should know. And I'll tell you, growing up, I was a wide receiver at my young age. I wasn't really big enough to play a lot of other positions. I had good hands. I could run, so that's why.
Right.
I had different coaches tell me different things about which foot should be forward, Eric. Like if I'm on the left or I'm on the right, or what route to be run. All those different nuances come into play.
Yeah, and when you talk about that footwork and what foot's forward versus back, that's important because usually these routes are based on steps, right? And so if you have your inside foot up first, it's going to hit on a certain step on a certain type of break on a certain type of route. So that's why that's important. And one thing to keep in mind too with these routes and the route combinations that we go through later are that typically the depth of these routes. So in that bottom quadrant there, you see it's 3-step routes. Those 3-step routes are matching up with the quarterback's drop. So usually a 1 and 3 step type of drop from a quarterback, typically from under center. It changes a little bit with the quarterback in shotgun, but typically the depth of the route matches the depth of the drop by the quarterback. So again, it's in rhythm, the timing's good, and you're hitting those passing windows.
What did you play? You were a running back, weren't you?
I played running back, yes.
So as a running back, I think generally you got to know the entire route tree, but you're not going to run everything in the route tree in most offenses, right?
No, no. Of course, you do have to, split out at times in some of those spread formations. But for running backs, when you look at playbooks, there's a whole separate route tree just for running backs. What you're doing, whether it's a check release, straight to the flats, Texas routes where you're running, over the middle. So there's usually in a playbook, there's usually a separate route tree just for running backs.
Yeah, that's something maybe we can get into even a little bit later in
No
another
doubt.
episode. In the meantime, all right, let's start with this route tree for wide receivers. Let's start at the bottom and the typical slant route, which can be run from in a number of different ways as far as depth is concerned. It's one the Bills really do like to run. But let's start with the slant route and why it's called a slant, what it looks like.
Right. And so the slant route is usually, ideally, it's 3 steps. So on that third step, you're making that 45-degree break to the middle of the field. But as you said, there are other versions of slant. So sometimes offenses will have a tag where it's a run, but they tag it with a slant. And usually that's a 1-step slant. That's a now route where you're taking 1 step as a receiver and then breaking towards the middle of the field. But there are also 5-step slants. And the Bills run a lot of these with Diggs, with Davis off of RPOs. A lot of people call them glance routes. So slants come in many different variations. 1, 3, and 5 are the most used. And the funny thing about it last year is that Stephon Diggs, as a receiver for the Bills, was the second most in targets with 26 slant routes, 26, second most receptions with 21 on slant routes, second most yards with 279 yards. And he was tied for first in touchdowns on slant routes with 2.
Amazing. When Eric says RPO, he means run pass option. It's when you see Josh
Yes.
Allen put the ball in the belly of a running back. You can say, oh, I can give it to him and let him run. But no, guess what? I got Stephon beating this guy on the slant. So I'm going to throw it there. And the Bills have been very good at that. Let's go to the next route you see on your tree, which is up the ladder a little bit. It's the quick out, which is called the flat. I like talking about this one because when I was a kid, that was the first passing route I ever learned. We call it
Right.
a square out because look at it. It looks like you're squaring. If you actually went back down and over, you'd have a literal square, right? So that's why it's called a square out. And it's also a way to remind the wide receiver to kind of put that foot in the ground and turn 90 degrees and just go right there. And you're going right down the line. So that's a square out, but it also can be called a quick out. A lot of different ways that you can call this, but you want to make sure you kind of make it so you're kind of turning the right way. It is different than a slant in that regard.
Right, right. And normally, whether it's a square out, square in, usually they're, quick breaking routes, as you said, usually a sharper cut. So growing up, you called it a square in. It's usually, hey, it's a hard cut. But the thing with these in and out breaking routes in that short area, like the quick out and quick in, is that there are, again, variations and levels to how you run that as a receiver. So sometimes it's a sharp 90-degree cut. It's based on footwork. By the time you get to your 5th step, you're breaking out or you're breaking in. But in some offenses, they like it to be a speed cut where you're going to see that wide receiver rounded off on purpose. So sometimes when you're watching the game or you're watching the film after the game, and you're like, man, he rounded that off. Well, some offenses, they want it to be a speed cut. So kind of differentiating the two between a 90-degree sharp cut and the speed cut is something that is in, basically every offense.
Yeah, and you can also go in on this, like we said. Eric's talking about
Yes.
doing the in, quick in. We have a quick out on the graph here. And if you want to go below that, we could do a slant to the out. A lot of times that would be called an arrow, maybe, right? I mean, you go
Arrow,
literally where
diagonal,
you are,
yes.
yep, to the spot where you see quick out. If you go from the ball, the black dot, to the quick out there, you might be called an arrow. You're just arrowing right there. You're not even slanting. You're not going straight ahead. You're going right there. That could be an arrow. Let's talk about the hitch. This will look like a curl, but it's quicker. These are the 3-step routes, as Eric has with the blue graphic there. It says 3-step routes. Hitch is a very, very quick turnaround, essentially, I would say.
Yeah, and this is one of the most common routes in all of the offenses in the NFL and high school level. There obviously are some variations to the release. So sometimes you see Diggs release outside but still get vertical. And then basically almost like it's like a stop route. You hear that a lot too, where he just hits the top of the route and then stops and turns around. So he's not really curling back. He's not really working back to the quarterback or the ball. It's more of like a stop route. And usually, again, under 10 yards in that quick game. It's something that a route that Allen loves because it's stationary. He can throw it to a landmark. He can see once the receiver releases into his route and gets vertical and then gets to the top of the route, he knows where he's going to be. And I mean, last year, again, Diggs was a monster when it came to hitch routes. He was first in targets with 43. He was first in receptions with 33. And yet he was first in yards with 325 yards. And he had the top explosive plays. So plays that led to 15 or 20 yards or more. He had 9 explosive plays just on this hitch route alone.
What about when Cole Beasley was a big part of the offense in the slot? Did he run a lot of these hitches? It feels like this is a route that he would be really good at, just kind of getting to the spot and turning around.
Yes, he was very efficient with this route. And a lot of times, again, it may end up being a hitch where he gets to the top of the route in that short area and turns around. But a lot of times when it came to Beasley in the slot, much like we'll see with Kincaid this year, they were option routes that had a hitch built into it. And you saw him kind of, turn around and balls right on him. So yes, Beasley was a monster when it came to this route.
And then let me ask you one more question, Eric, about these shorter routes. So people are looking to go, well, wait a minute. If I know that Stephon Diggs is going to do it, I'm a defensive coordinator. I'm going to kind of put my guy there. I'm going to sit on that. I'm going to have a defender right in that spot. How can a Diggs adjust? How can a Beasley adjust from a slot? He's got to run a hitch in towards Josh Allen, but there's a defender right in that spot.
Right. And again, it's the leverage, right? So prior to the snap, Diggs is at the line of scrimmage. He's reading that leverage of that defender that's over him. Is he playing inside, outside, heads up? And then based on that, he's going to change his release and make it look like a different route and add that nuance. Maybe at the top of the route, he kind of gives a looky outside to get that DB to jump like he's going to run an outbreaking route, but then he just turns around inside, has that leverage now, and the ball's there. So there again, that's why the nuance to a release or when that receiver is moving up the field and what we call the drive phase, that's why it's so important to have that nuance because again, you're right. Why wouldn't a defender just get up on him, play man coverage, and just work him as he's getting into his route? So that's why that nuance for a route runner and a receiver is so important.
And that's why it's important for the quarterback to recognize it too. That's why the sight, body language, understanding
Body
each
language.
other, knowing, where each one is going to be. And that's why those guys working so much in the off season and leading up to that game is very important. Let's go to the deeper routes now. What do you mean by double move 8 to 10 yards, which you have there in the green graphic?
Right. So this is an area that Matt Bowen kind of outlined. And that's an area, again, you're going to make it look like one route. Say Stephon Diggs is getting vertical up the field, and then he's making it look like an out route, but maybe turns it to an out and up, right? You're going to see some of those routes from Diggs last year where he was in the slot. One game was the Lions game, the Titans game, where he's working and making it look like he's running a corner, and then he's breaking back to the middle of the field on a post route, right up the middle of the field. So those are the areas where you're going to try to prey on the quick game where a defender's thinking, hey, I'm going to jump this route if he runs this specific route because they ran it twice already in this game. But then that's when you get that double move and those big plays down the field.
All right. At the top of the route, you see now it's a little bit more expansive. Some that are in, some that are out towards the quarterback, away from the quarterback. Now you're getting to an area of the field where you're going to have a little more space to operate here. So the curl is the deeper hitch. You get up, you turn around, you come back to the quarterback. That's very key because there's more space for the ball to travel. You don't just want to sit like you would on a hitch,
Right.
maybe. You want to come back to the quarterback a little bit more because you don't want to give defender time to jump in front of that. What's the key to running a proper curl route?
Yeah, like you said, it's working back to the ball. So once you get to the top of route, some offenses have you kind of curl it in kind of like a J, right? Some want you to hit the top of the route with your right foot, so your outside foot or your left foot if you're running from the left side, and work back to the middle of the field on an angle, 45-degree angle back to the ball. But as you said, the most important thing on this type of route is to become QB friendly. Show your numbers and work back to the ball. Don't wait for it, because if you wait for it on a curl route in that intermediate area above 10 yards, that's when the defense and the defenders can break on the ball and it leads to turnovers.
Okay, so now we have comeback on the opposite side of that. Is this just basically the same a different terminology for the same route, a comeback route and a curl route?
Yeah, and a lot of times the comeback routes usually occur from outside. So the outermost receiver, the X or the Z, not really a slot. Comeback routes are very similar. Breaks at top of the route, you're breaking in the very same manner. But again, you're breaking to the outside, working back to the ball, working to the boundary, becoming QB friendly. And yes, it's just one of those deeper routes, but usually it's run by the outside wide receiver.
I feel like Gabe Davis, this is a route he runs a lot. A lot of times you see him on the sidelines grabbing a ball before he goes out of bounds. He does a great job of toe tapping over there. I feel like that's something that Gabe Davis would run. And also, when you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, you better be good at comeback routes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And a little variation that the Bills run is where the outside receiver will make it look like a curl. So he'll break inside and turn inside toward the quarterback, but won't work back to the quarterback to the middle of the field. What they do is kind of fade out to the boundary and flatten it out to the boundary again, because Josh Allen can hit you from anywhere on the field. Even if the ball's on the far left hash and you're the outermost receiver on the right side, you can run these out breaking routes like comebacks, like the comeback, the deep comeback, because he has the arm strength to still hit you all the way across the field.
As Eric points out, it's great. It's a great point, Eric. Like a comeback route is generally outside. You're coming back, you're going towards the sideline. I have heard it called at the lower levels curl in and curl out. All of these we've had square in, square out. You can do that if you want to make it more terminology friendly to
Right.
your players. If you're a high school coach, a Pop Warner coach, go do that. You don't have to have 7 different names. You can just say curl in, curl out, dig in, dig out, even whatever you want to do. If you want to make it friendly, that's just the key to a lot of this.
Yeah, it's a language, right, Sal? So again, customizing it to your system, but more importantly, to your players. That's why the best coaches are the best teachers. How do I make this relatable to whatever level of player you're having, high school, middle school, NFL level? That's why this game is so great and why the best coaches are the best teachers.
That's why we're doing this too, folks. Sal Capaccio and Eric Turner, Guide to the Gridiron. We hope you're enjoying it. Let's get to a little bit more on the passing tree and the passing routes. All right, the next one up is a dig. So this looks very familiar to a square in or an in cut. This is a
Right.
dig, though. What's the key here?
Yeah, the key here, obviously, the depth. Again, it's much like that square in, but you're getting deeper. You're getting into that intermediate and sometimes that deeper area. And I've seen a lot of discourse when it comes to a dig or just a square in at that depth, because sometimes the dig is basically you're getting vertical and then you're running slightly on a 45-degree angle, like you're running a post for 2 or 3 steps, but then you're breaking it flat across the field. So there are there's some nuance and variations to a dig, but more importantly, again, get to that intermediate area and run that deep breaking, in breaking route across the middle. It's something the Bills do a lot of, obviously. And you mentioned Gabe Davis. He's one of the best at this, especially, and we'll talk about it later, especially when you're seeing a lot of those single high coverages that you see against the Bills offense.
One thing I want to point out too is what happens after you make the catch. A coaching point here. If you got kids that you're coaching out there, if you're playing the game a little bit, if you catch a dig route and you're coming across, catch it and get upfield, right, Eric? I mean,
Mhm.
don't just stay on your path. Obviously, it sounds pretty basic, but it's true. Like a lot of times you'll see someone catch the ball and just continue on their path. It's important to catch that ball, get your head around and turn upfield. You want to score a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, that's why the accuracy and placement is so important
Yep.
on this route, because if they hit you in stride, you can immediately transition into a runner and
Yep.
then get into that third level and beyond and get some of those yards after the catch.
All right. Deep out is basically the opposite of a dig. It is different than a comeback, but you really are trying to work the sideline and make sure that you don't leave a lot of room for the defender, but it's got to be really good ball placement.
Yeah, same thing with the square out, again, just in that deeper area, 12 to 15 yards. But again, you can have a sharp cut outside, or you could have that speed cut. Again, same thing applies when you're talking about the square out and the deep out.
All right. So let's remember we're doing the ball on the left here as you look at the graphic. So everything to the left side would be an in towards the quarterback. If the receiver is on the right and the ball's on the left, everything towards the quarterback is always in. Everything away from the quarterback to the sideline is always out. That's why some of these names you can say in, you can say out. Not
Right.
really true with our next couple. Post and corner. A post pattern is always into the middle of the field. It's called a post because the goalposts are there. That's why it's called a post pattern. You're running towards the goalposts, Eric.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And this is another one. Gabe Davis is a
Yep.
monster when it comes to this route, getting to that third level, working to the middle of the field. Again, remember, the Bills see a lot of those two high safety coverages. So they have two safeties deep. That means the middle of the field is open. And the Bills love to attack it with Josh Allen's big arm and some of the receivers that he has. So that post is usually a 45-degree break to the goal post. Now, again, there's some variations to that. There's the skinny post where Instead of 45-degree break to the middle of the field, it's more of a 20-degree break. And again, you're getting right up the field. As soon as you catch it, hopefully you're catching it in stride, getting up the field. And we talk about Davis on this route last year, on the post route. He had 5 targets, which was 9th overall. He had 3 receptions, which was 6th overall, 207 yards, which was second overall, and 2 touchdowns, which was 1st overall on post routes. As you guys remember, a lot of those yards came against the Pittsburgh Steelers. A lot of those big plays against Minka Fitzpatrick and that Steelers defense came on that post route from Gabe Davis.
It's my favorite route to run. I mean, Eric, you couldn't stop Sal Capaccio on the post route in 1990 in high school. I just want you to know
Love
that.
it. Love it.
And then you have let me ask you this before we get to corner. Tell me about a seam. So you say skinny post, seam route, because it's the same thing. You're staying up the seam, but it's inside. So what's the key there in the different nuance?
Yeah, a seam route is really based on what coverage you're seeing. So within each coverage, whether it's, again, a single high safety look or a 2 high safety look, each of those are going to have different areas where there's a seam. And a seam is basically just an area up, usually up the seam, up the inside of the numbers, outside of the hash, where based on the coverage, you're having an opening or a gray area between the hook, the curl defender, and maybe a flats defender and, a cover 3 look. So it's each seam is different versus what coverage. But when you hear the seam, it's usually just, creasing what coverage they're playing on defense.
I remember going to a Bills game back in the 90s, and the old Houston Oilers, as you know, Eric, they were just incredible throwing the ball and shoot.
Right.
They were beating him on the post pattern several times. I said to my high school coach, my defensive coordinator, like that week, I'm like, Coach, why did they get beat on so many post patterns? And this is key for like why you understand which routes to run against defenses. He said, and I love my friend Mark Kelso, but he said, well, Leonard Smith, who was a safety at the time, Mark Kelso, he said Leonard Smith is too undisciplined to stay in his spot, and Mark Kelso is too slow to cover for him. That's what he said. And it's true, right? Because, I mean, if you can get 2 guys who you can kind of get to that seam and on the post pattern right up the middle, that's the key to something like this. This is a route you can run against 2 high because you can split the difference if you're manipulating one or the other.
Yeah, it's all about getting in the space and getting your weapons in the space. And again, each coverage is different on the defensive side of the ball, and it's just finding that space with these routes and route combinations.
All right. The opposite of that is the corner route. It's self-explanatory. It says corner because you're going to the corner, or you could call it a flag route. We've called it a flag route before, a deep one that's going to the flag. Hey, listen, back in the day, this is why these things are called this, folks. Listen to this. Now, I'm a little bit older than Eric, but I think he knows what I'm talking about. They used to have flags and not pylons in the end zone. So the reason why this is called a flag, you would tell the wide receiver, run to the corner flag of the end zone. You could call it a pylon now if you want.
Yeah, and the thing, you see it on the diagram that, it's labeled a 7, and a lot of the old passing route trees and passing systems were numbers-based systems. So all of these routes that we talked about, they had a number system. And usually in-breaking routes, any type of in-breaking route, the slant, the square in, the dig, those would be numbered. And usually it was an even number for us. We always use even numbers to break in and odd numbers to break out. And so you'll see at the top of this route tree, right, you're going to have that corner route labeled as a 7. So when you hear commentators like Tony Romo say, hey, the wide receiver or tight end ran a bang 7 or a flag or a 7 route, that's usually talking about that corner route. And as you said, yes, it was called the flag route because of the flags in the end zones. And that's the thing. That's the nuance behind this, is depending where the ball is spotted on the field, whether you're at the 20 or at the 40-yard line, the break to that corner could be different. Maybe some teams like to run it to the front pylon, so the back pylon. So the angle of departure out of the top of that route on that corner route could be different based on what offense that you're talking about.
All right, let's talk about the 9 route, the one that everybody loves. It gets everybody out of the stands. It's the deep ball. You can call it a fade, depending on where you are. You can call it a go route, call it a streak, anything you want. But it basically means run as fast as you can straight down the field, and let's see what we can do.
Yeah, and as a receiver, you better be keeping your head down till you get to that 20-yard mark, because, again, it's that deep ball. And a lot of times you hear the streak or 9 route called. Again, 9 route, that'd be the number on this. You hear that go route called. Wide receiver, you're keeping your head down, you're running down the field. And a lot of times these type of routes, especially from the outside, aren't really the primary route. Usually it's almost what we call an alert, where, hey, maybe the quarterback gets to the line of scrimmage and they're expecting a 2 high look, but they get a single high safety, and you got one-on-one with Stephon Diggs outside, and you want to hit that alert route. You want to hit that go route. So you hear the quarterback call the alert, and he's going to Stephon Diggs on that one-on-one. So a lot of times that route is either an alert at the line of scrimmage or it's just a clearing route. So you'll see the Bills run digs deep. He's going to take a corner and a safety with him. Now you're opening up a 7 route behind him, a corner route behind him on a sail concept. So that's one of those things that a lot of times a go route is called, and it's not necessarily the primary route. And Davis, again, last year on go routes, again, been one of his bread and butters throughout his entire career. He had 13 explosive receptions on go routes, which was the 5th most last year. And that was only one behind Justin Jefferson.
Well, that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about to end this and spend a few minutes on. You don't want, if you just keep that up there for 1 second, Eric. So
Yeah.
take a look at the route tree, everyone. Whenever you see a game in a play and there's 2 receivers in the same spot, generally something went wrong. You really don't
Yes.
want that, right? I mean, you're like, okay, there's no reason for 2. Why would you have one receiver bring his defender into a spot where someone else is getting a target, right? I mean, that's basically the way to do it. So all of these route combinations, these routes have complement routes that you'd say, let's do this with that. And Eric's broke it down real well here on another graphic that we can use and show you a lot of times how these teams will use those route combinations. Let's talk about that and what that would look like.
Yeah, and you make a great point. This route tree, they are locked routes, right? A lot of the offenses nowadays are going to have read routes or option routes where, hey, you may be running this, but if you see this coverage or leverage, you're going to run something else. So that is something to keep in mind. Yes, that was the route tree, and those are locked routes, but there are variations to that on any given play. And so when we talk about combinations, now you're taking those routes that we just broke down individually for the route tree, and you're stringing them together in 2 and 3 man concepts. And when you read most playbooks, you're going to have them broken down in that way. Again, running back route tree, wide receiver route concepts, 2 and 3 man concepts. We're going to start with some of the basic ones. And if you guys have more that you want us to talk about, leave a comment in the YouTube description, YouTube comments area that we can talk about later. So, Sal, one of the most common ones is the slant flat. So you're getting that 3-step slant right here on the right side, and you're getting the diagonal route, the arrow route. Again, usually this route right here by the Y is usually 3 yards. So again, the spacing matters, right? Sal, one issue the Bills had last year in Ken Dorsey's first season was the spacing was off at times, as you just mentioned. So this is one of the most common route concepts that wants to attack the outer third of a defense, kind of stretch it horizontally. And the Bills, I know under Dable, called this the D slant. So it was a diagonal slant. Again, different terminology, different names for a lot of these concepts, but that is one that you see a lot on game days.
And let's remember how we labeled the receivers. The first episode, we talked about the X receiver, the Z receiver, the slot receiver, and the Y, who is the tight end. So you could basically even tag a play call, whatever a play call sounds like. You could say X dig. You could say S post. You could tag it any way you want to let that guy know, hey, normally you run this. On this play, we want you to run this. Typically, one would be Y. Y banana, right? I mean, that's the famous one from John Gruden. He'd say Y banana,
Right.
but you could say Y arrow
Square
on
Y
this
banana.
you're
Yep.
showing.
Right. And the thing that has evolved over the last, I don't know, 20 years or so when it comes to offenses and college football is that a lot of times, again, back in the day, it was the Don Coryell system where it was like 989 is a route tree. Well, now it's more conceptual. So again, you can relate to your player. So you hear the Bills talk about, hey, sometimes we have one word names for a route concept or a play, and then everyone else knows what they're supposed to do off that, kind of like what you just said. So this D slant, when they say that in the huddle, they know that what these 2 receivers are supposed to be doing based on that, much like on the other side. So the concept to the left is called levels. Again, you're attacking the second level. So you're going to have the innermost wide receiver running a deeper in, more of a dig type route. And then the outside receiver is going to be running that square in, or what the Bills call an under route. And again, you're attacking usually a second level defender. This one, probably that Sam or nickel defender that you see in the slot there. But you also see it run this way too, Sal, where you're getting that dig right here by the slot and running a drag right here on a drive route. So again, levels concept, you're attacking to the middle of the field, that second level, just another way to attack the middle of the field, the largest area on the football field with these concepts.
Let's go back to what you said about calling them with numbers. Like if you're in a 2-minute situation, especially, you can literally just call out a number to the route runner. And I know, like when I coached high school ball, for us to be able to keep it simple, we would literally give 3 numbers. You'd say 576, 576. That means the first guy runs a 5, the second guy runs a 7, the next guy runs a 6.
Right.
It can be that
Simple.
simple as long as the defense doesn't know your actual what you're doing and what your route combinations are. At the NFL level, it'll be a little harder. There's terminology that gets shared. There's a lot of film breakdown. They know this, but that's a really simple way to keep it, just to tell everybody exactly what route they're running on that particular play as they get up to the huddle, and keep it simple.
Yeah, and if you're talking little league and the lower levels, that's the way you usually start because again, you learn the route tree and you break it down that way and relate it to the kids that way. And then so when you're on the field or you're drawing up those play cards, it's very simple. Hey, 989. I know I need to, two of those three receivers are going to be running street, go routes or streak routes. So again, it's all about relating to the players that you're teaching, and that's what's great about the language of football.
Let me ask you about what you said a minute ago about the spacing with the Bills last year. Did you find that that was more in the design or the personnel that they had some spacing issues, as you put it?
I think it's a little of both, of course, because I think when you talk about the different weapons that they had, they were different types of weapons. But also, again, you went from a guy like Cole Beasley that did a lot of those seam and option routes for many years for the Bills, and Josh Allen could read him like a book, to new targets getting in there. And I felt at times that the receivers were given almost too much leeway in their read routes and their option routes and read routes, that it really just kind of congested things at times. And I will say, as the season went on, it did start to sort itself out. So those reps and that experience did
Sure.
help a lot.
I also think that guys like Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, some veterans, they've been in this league, they've played these positions. They're going to help out with this as well, when they're in those spots. Not to say that Isaiah McKenzie couldn't do it necessarily, but I think that they got guys that they really feel can really help out understanding the nuances of what they want from these route combinations. Give us another one here.
All right, so let's start from the left side here. These are two route concepts or combinations that are very, very good versus single high coverages, especially if you're talking like cover three, simple cover three, right? So on the left side, you see a seam route by the slot receiver, basically a go route right up the seam, and then a curl route on the outside where that outside receiver is working back to the ball. And more times than not, in a lot of systems, that's called a hoss. Again, the ball is probably going to go to, especially if it's a cover three look, it's usually a go to this curl. Sometimes it's a hitch, but again, you're attacking a certain area, a certain defender, in a certain coverage.
Okay. Um, these are this is something I like. I want to just kind of bring up to. It's not a terminology thing, but well, it is, I guess. When you hear a lot of times, I'll say it. And maybe I refer to this a little too often, but I think it's always something to try to hammer home. Putting a defender in conflict. This is a great one here to put a
Mhm.
defender in conflict, right? So let's say the defender on the right, if you're in zone, he might have to decide if he wants to go a little bit in the inside and go with the Z receiver, or he wants to keep going back to stay with the Y, the tight end. Putting the defender in conflict, basically, he has to make a decision. Now it's on the quarterback. He's not reading the receiver, he's reading the defender. If the
Mhm.
defender drops, he comes short. If the defender comes short, he goes long. A lot of times, whatever is run here, wherever you go with the ball, is dictated on the actual defender and not the offense.
Right. And so you look at that dagger concept, it's one of the most common used terminology when it comes to again, that innermost receiver getting up the seam, and then you're running that dig route across the middle of the field, usually again versus single high coverages. That's when you hear quarterbacks or analysts talk about mental processing pre to post snap. That's exactly what you just described, Sale, because the quarterback has to know what coverage they're in prior to snap and more importantly post snap. And that picture may change. Obviously, the good defenses do it. Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier have done it very well at a high level over the years, especially when you talk about the secondary, making it look like a certain coverage. But once you know what coverage you're in, then you have to know, as you said, what defender to attack. So if they're trying to attack the seam or the hook to curl defender out here as this guy widens out,
Yep.
well, the quarterback and wide receiver have to be on the same page and say, okay, I'm not going to get it in this first window right here. I'm probably going to get it
Great.
behind that defender in that second window over the middle field. So that's what, when you talk about mental processing as an analyst, as a guy that's on the sideline for a quarterback, that's what we're talking about when we're breaking down defenses.
And they can literally think about the specific will linebacker maybe they're playing, what he likes to do on that particular play, how
Hmm.
fast he is, how long he is in Tremaine Edmonds' case, right? You might have to wait a little for him to clear a
Yes.
little bit more, something like that. Those are all the little different nuances that go into it. Any of the route combos or anything you want to show?
Yeah, there's some more here. So this is a Mills concept on the left side, and usually that's just a dig route behind that second level defenders, regardless of what coverage you're in. You're going to get that deep in breaking route, that dig, that square in, but more in that intermediate area. And then behind it, you're running that post. And this is a route the Bills love to run because they see a lot of those too high safety looks, and cover 2, Tampa 2, cover 4. And so this is a great cover 2, too high safety look, coverage beater where you're getting the ball down the field, whether it's between the second level linebackers and the safety levels, or at the third level to the post, to Gabe Davis, to Stephon Diggs down the field.
All right. I think this is the good spot to say this because of what we're doing here, and you can maybe even show it. A hot route. All right. So we didn't talk about what hot means. So a hot route is basically going somewhere after a guy blitzes. It's hot, right? The guy blitzes, it's hot. You got to be ready. You got to be aware. It's coming hot. You're firing it in there right away. So let's just say the Sam linebacker who Erik shows is blitzing right here. The Sam linebacker's blitzing. The slot receiver who he's going to highlight is basically going to replace the Sam linebacker. He's just going to go right to where the Sam linebacker is. That's as simple as it is, folks. That's a hot route. Anytime you hear it, people might not know what it means. It's pretty simple. You're literally going to the spot where I would say general rule is, Erik, you tell me if this is a good way to put it. The general rule is the first defender inside you blitzes, you go to where he was and replace him.
Yeah, ideally, when a quarterback gets to the line of scrimmage, he knows the protection. He knows, hey, these guys are the biggest threats to rush the quarterback. So a lot of times, what he does, he'll get to the line of scrimmage, identify that structure, and then say, okay, now that on this play, the Sam is the hot. So if that guy rushes, this slot receiver will know, hey, I need to replace him. I need to get behind him. I need to find green. It doesn't matter what type of route it is. I need to get behind him, get into that area that he just left, get the ball, and we're moving. So it's a way for the offense to account for a guy that is rushing in the Sam on this play that they don't have protection for. Maybe this running back is going out. They don't have that additional pass blocker, whether it's an offensive lineman, tight end, or running back to account for. So they are able to overcome that when they don't have a numbers advantage.
And look, defenses are smart. If the Sam blitzes, the free safety might come down because he knows that the slot is replacing him. And he's going to say, I'm going to steal that hot route away from you. This is the chess game that goes on during the middle of a football game. So there's all these different things that the quarterback's looking at and the defense is looking at. I listened to the podcast called Play Callers. It's excellent, from Jordan Rodriguez. I don't know if
it's very good.
It's incredible. And I really liked the point that Sean McVay said. I think it was McVay, might have been Shanahan, but one of them said, we wanted the defense to run exactly as it's supposed to run. Because if they're running exactly what they're supposed to run, we can predict what we need to do. We don't want them to run out of structure. It might seem like, oh, we got them confused. No, we want them to be smart and do exactly what they're supposed to, because then we can make our calls and predict what we want to do better.
Yeah, it's the counter, right? So we run this a lot, and we expect them to game plan it in this way. So when they do that with their counter, we're going to have another level to it to get behind them, to get into some open space, much like this play concept right here on the right side, Sal. We talked about that levels concept, usually that high-low work into the middle of the field. Well, the outer high-low concept is typically called a smash concept, and you're seeing that bang 7, that corner route by the inside receiver, slot receiver, or tight end running that corner route. Sometimes the outside receiver is running a hitch, a curl. You're high-lowing, especially in this defensive look where there's two high safeties, more of a cover 2, Tampa 2 type look, where that corner is going to be the flats defender there. So you're high-lowing him. Is he going to stay with the low route, or is he going to go deep and fall back deep to help protect against the corner route?
We would call it short and long back in the 65-pound Lil Loop Thunder days. Short and long, baby, is how we called it. All right. As Erik transitions to the next one, you can follow him on Twitter at Erik J. Turner, Erik with a K. You can follow me at Sal Sports. What's next?
All right. The final one is it was just a throw in, but it's one that Bills fans will recognize. It was a route concept, a 2-man route concept that the Bills ran a ton of with Cole Beasley and Gabe Davis, several touchdowns over the years with this concept. So again, X receivers running that go route, that 9 route, that streak. And then Cole Beasley, or the slot receiver, you're going to see this. Again, you're going to see this with Kincaid, because the Bills offense are going to have Kincaid in the slot, and they're going to run this to death. Those option routes, those read routes where he can run that curl and a square out or square in. And so what the Bills used to do is, hey, especially against these two high safety looks, is they want this wide receiver or slot player to get the attention of the corner out here. So get the attention of that guy. So if he is flat-footed and stays with that option route after they've run it 4 or 5 times, well, guess what? That's when the Bills would hit Gabe Davis down the field for touchdowns. It's a big play. It's a go route. It's an option route. The Bills under Dable used to call it Gotti.
Mhm.
It's just one I wanted to throw in because you guys will recognize this when they run it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember a few years ago down in Miami, and Josh just threaded the needle in between down the
Mm.
sidelines in that window right there. Like this is a money ball for Josh. He's really good at this.
Yeah, I mean, you guys recall the Steelers touchdown, Gabe Davis in the red zone, where Cole Beasley again caught the attention of that boundary corner, that short side corner. His eyes were looking at Beasley on the option route because if he breaks out, he was going to break on that route. Well, that left Gabe Davis right down the sideline, and as you said, Josh Allen can thread the pass in these what we call the honey hole between the corner down here and this safety. Josh is one of the best at threading that needle.
That's the hole shot, right? They'll say he
Yeah.
Josh says everywhere, yeah, there was a hole shot there, right?
Yeah, 100%. Honey hole shots usually between the corner and the safety, and usually, again, in these too high safety looks.
All right. I think that's it as far as the route combos. Of course, there's so many others. And if you have any
So many.
questions about anything we've shown, anything we've talked about, what can be run, what can't be run, how the Bills like to do things. Eric's broke down the film so well with his group over there. You can always ask. We want you to do that. We encourage that. That's why we're trying to do this here today. And we're going to stay on, some other of these terminologies that, you want to talk about that we've already had, but we're going to move on to some new ones, especially on the defensive
Yes.
side, and talk about some of the things that go along to that side as well, Eric. It's been pretty cool. And I'm glad that we're able to do this.
Yeah, this is so fun. Again, breaking it down to the nitty gritty, right? The basics, the foundational stuff, so that everyone can feel included in the conversation when we're talking football.
No doubt about it. All right. So thanks a lot for watching again. We try to keep these as short as possible. We went about 40 minutes for you today. That's about as long as we'll usually go. So come
Yeah.
on aboard. You're not going to be here long. You're going to learn a lot of football. We're all going to be able to watch it together. Eric, tell everybody where they can find all of your stuff in your group.
Yeah, again, at Cover One, as you can see, at the handles down there in the bottom left. We appreciate you including us in this, and we love this type of stuff. Obviously, this is what we do on a daily basis. And any questions that you guys have, hit those comments,
Yep.
smash that like button, subscribe to both of our channels because again, we're just trying to do this for the average fan and for fans that are maybe even looking to strengthen their vocabulary and terminology when it comes to football.
Cover One YouTube channel, Sal Sports on YouTube as well. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time on Guide to the Gridiron.